Hey, I just wanted to update you on the story that I did a while ago on another video where I was talking about the discovery of what they believe is the location where Simon Peter and Andrew and Philip lived in the town of Bethsaida. And this town had been covered over with debris for centuries, but recent excavations at this particular site on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee appears to be the exact church that was built during the Byzantine time over the place, the town, the village of the apostles that lived there in Bethsaida. A couple of my best friends from my book are Simon Peter and Andrew and Philip, of course, and this is where their home was, where they grew up. So it's pretty exciting to me. And writing a book about them and everything, it's so neat because you kind of get to know them in such a deep way from the scriptures, and it just feels like, they're here today, like they could be your friends. So it's pretty neat. So I wanted to read to you the Haaretz article and kind of give you an update on some of the findings around the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, where they believe this is the true Bethsaida. A bishop trekking around the lake in 725 saw and described the Church of the Apostles exactly where this one has been found, archaeologists say. Archaeologists believe they have likely found the Church of the Apostles, which Christian tradition says has been built over the home of Jesus' disciples, Simon Peter and Andrew, in the village of Bethsaida, today part of the Basilica Nature Reserve by the Sea of Galilee. The archaeologists from the Kinneret Academic College and Nyack College of New York said the Jewish village of Bethsaida, on which the Roman city of Julius had been built, was much larger than had been thought, they announced on Thursday. What can be said for certain is that the excavations of Bet Habek, aka El Raj, found the hallmarks of a large Byzantine-era church. The most distinctive indicator is gilded glass tesserae, which is mosaic tiles. Professor R. Stephen Notley of the private Christian college in New York tells Haaretz, those are for wall mosaics and only appear in churches, he says. So far, only the southern rooms of the church have been dug up, but the bird's eye view of the structure also supports the theory that this place was a church because of the west-east axis and the division into a central nave with two aisles, explains Professor Mordecai Aviam from Kinneret Academic College. The archaeologists also found marble fragments from the chancel screen that would have separated the congregation from the priest at the altar. The stone screen had been decorated with a floral wreath. Other discoveries included mosaic flooring, roof tile characteristics of big buildings, and a fragment of a chalk carving featuring a cross. Finding a Byzantine period church is one thing, but why do the archaeologists whose work is supported by the Israeli Antiquities Authority think it's the Church of the Apostles, no less? It's the historical tradition we possess, and there's no good reason to question it, Notley tells Haaretz. Namely, in the year 725, when the Bavarian bishop named Willibald was touring the Holy Land and wrote about walking from Capernaum to Kursi, and on the way, seeing the church of Simon Peter and his brother Andrew, Aviam explains. No other churches have been found between those two towns, Aviam clarifies, and the El Araj church seems to be from the appropriate period. The ruins have not been precisely dated yet, but based on more than 100 coins, the church seems to have been built in the 5th century, nearly 500 years after the apostles would have lived, and to have been abandoned in the late 7th to 8th century. Notley qualifies that the identification of the church will remain theoretical until proof can be found, such as an inscription. It would be normal to find an inscription in a church of the Byzantine period describing in whose memory it was built, for instance, he says. And of course, part of it is still not unearthed yet. During the excavation of a Roman period home 100 meters north of the main excavation area, the archaeologists found typical Jewish stone vessels and Jewish oil lamps, as well as more than 20 Roman period coins and fishing lead weights. Another discovery in this fourth excavation season is a Crusader beehive lamp composed of two separately turning parts. At the other end of the cultural rainbow is a discovery made in 2017, the relief of a lioness carved on a basalt rock, which the archaeologists think graced a synagogue that also stood there in the early Byzantine period. The case of El Araj as the long-lost city of Bethsaida, home to Simon Peter, Andrew, and Philip, in John 1:44 and 12:21, and elevated into the Roman city of Julius by the local Jewish governor Philip Herod, son of the great vassal King Herod, has long been touted by Notley and Aviam. Notley notes that because no church had been found in the relevant area until now, what has happened is that people tended to correct pilgrimage records, drawing the pilgrimage testimonies about Bethsaida to Capernaum. The argument was made that an 8-sided structure in Capernaum was the church mentioned that was built over the house of Simon Peter, he explains. And we've seen that in videos through the years that, 8-sided church that was built over, and then you go up and you look down and you see the foundation where it said that that was Simon Peter's home. So now they're thinking that it's under this church on the northern tip of the Sea of Galilee. Now we have a church right where the pilgrims say was a church. The early testimonies about the church over Simon Peter's house described it as a basilica. Would a Byzantine describe an 8-sided structure as a basilica? This is a question that needs to be addressed more fully, Notley tells Haaretz. Their theory competes with the nearby site of Etel as Bethsaida, which is argued by Professor Rami Arav of the Hebrew Union College. It is quite unreasonable to think that the builders of this structure in the 8th century would know that anything, let alone Simon Peter's house from the 1st century level, is buried 3 meters under their building, he tells Haaretz. You would need divine inspiration and imagination to know this. The settlement at El Araj dates at the very least to the Second Temple period, when it was a Jewish fishing village. Among other things, the archaeologists have found lead fishing weights. Some had argued that the site of El Araj had merely been a Roman army camp based on the 2017 discovery of Roman baths there. Not so, says Notley. In the Second Temple period, the early Jewish village, which became a Roman polis, had spread all over a very large area, most of which remains to be excavated. The city survived into the Roman period. In the 1st century, the Jewish tetrarch Herod Philip decided to build a proper Roman polis based on the Jewish village. He named his new city Julius. The first historical witnesses to the site of Bethsaida are all Roman, says Notley. We assume it was part of Hasmonean expansion into the Galilee. Arav, for his part, suggests that the 1st century level suits perfectly the description of Josephus Flavius of a Roman mercenary camp stationed during the First Jewish Revolt. The historian Josephus mentions Bethsaida once in his writings precisely when describing its urbanization, says Notley. He adds that there are 2 other known examples of Jewish villages being transformed into Roman hubs. Sepphoris, built by Herod Antipas, and Antipatris Tel Afek, built during the 1st century BCE by Herod the Great, who named it in honor of his father Antipater. Pliny, writing in the 1st century, also mentioned Julius. And then something strange happened. The city of Bethsaida, cum Julius, suddenly disappeared from the historical and archaeological record at the end of the 3rd century. Eusebius, the bishop of Caesarea, who lived and wrote prolifically in the 4th century, including the onomasticon, which means on the place names in the Holy Scripture, does not provide any details about Bethsaida or the church, indicating he does not personally know Bethsaida. Rabbinic testimonies about Bethsaida also go silent after the 3rd century. Then in the 5th century, a Byzantine settlement with a monastery and the church now found were built on the spot, and suddenly the literary sources begin anew. Avion points out that the level of the Sea of Galilee, aka Lake Kinneret, fluctuates a lot. It is entirely possible that for roughly 150 to 200 years the town was abandoned because the lake level rose and the ground became waterlogged. The church and the town would be abandoned again in the 8th century following a period of later Crusader occupation. It would then disappear from sight until archaeological investigation ensued. There is not yet sign of damage in the church from the well-known earthquake of 749 AD that devastated the Jordan Valley. Aviam even points out that we don't know if the church was abandoned before or after that quake. He adds that possibly silting from the nearby Jordan River mouth ruined the local fishing. And by the way, scanning technology indicates that more houses do lie beneath the silt. That's pretty exciting. It's likely the church was abandoned with the rise of the Umayyad Caliphate and Islamic presence in the land from the late 7th or early 8th century, which is when Bishop Willibald toured the land and described the great church. But he didn't mention whether or not the church was still being used. Well, more than likely it was covered over by the Muslims, because they did that everywhere, including the Hagia Sophia in Turkey, that had previously been the town of Constantinople. Bethsaida and the Church of the Apostles. There were 2 possibilities for biblical Bethsaida. In 2017, excavators at El Araj uncovered a Byzantine basilica. The question on everyone's mind, is this the lost Church of the Apostles? El Araj, located along the northern shores of the Sea of Galilee, is one of 2 sites proposed as biblical Bethsaida, the other being nearby Et Tel. In the Bible, the village is famously the home of the apostles Simon, Peter, and Andrew, and Philip. However, Bethsaida was abandoned in the 4th century and was not mentioned again until an 8th century Bavarian bishop traveled to the Church of the Apostles that was said to be built atop the site's ruins. Over the past century, scholars have tried repeatedly to locate biblical Bethsaida and the Church of the Apostles, and recent discoveries at the Byzantine Basilica at El Araj are now providing new evidence that the site may indeed be the location of the Church of the Apostles. From the start of the excavations, the team found gilded glass tesserae, which only appear in ornate churches of the Byzantine period. As the dig continued, it became clear that the basilica was extremely lavish. During the 2019 season, the team discovered the remains of elaborate mosaic floors. And in 2021, more of the church mosaic was uncovered, along with walls that indicated the building measured approximately 88 by 52 feet in size. The team also found 2 fragmentary inscriptions, one mentioning the construction of the basilica and the other referencing major renovations carried out on the church, according to Stephen Notley, professor of New Testament of Christian origins at Nyack College and co-director of the excavation. There are no other churches in the vicinity mentioned by Byzantine visitors to the Holy Land, and there's no reason to question that this is the Church of the Apostles. A strengthened case for El Araj. Excavations began at El Araj in 2016, revealing the remains of a Roman-era fishing village from around the time of Jesus, along with the large Byzantine basilica that was built centuries later atop the earlier village. The basilica only went out of use in the 8th century when a large earthquake devastated much of the region. While there is still no definitive evidence that El Araj is biblical Bethsaida, Notley notes that the Byzantine Church serves as a witness to the long Christian memory that kept alive the location of the city of the apostles. Everything we have discovered has only strengthened the case that El Araj is the site of New Testament Bethsaida. Initial excavations at El Araj in 2019 identified it with the Church of the Apostles, visited by the Bavarian bishop named Willibald in 725. And the findings revealed the remains of the large Byzantine church, complete with multicolored mosaics in geometric patterns built over the house of the apostles Simon, Peter, and Andrew on the shore of Galilee. During the 5th season of archaeological excavations at the site of Bet Habek El Araj, researchers identified inscriptions that helped solidify their belief that this was the church of Jesus' disciples, the real Bethsaida on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. The location of Bethsaida, a fishing village on the Sea of Galilee visited by Jesus in Luke 9:10, and home to the apostles Simon, Peter, Andrew, and Philip in John 1:44, according to the Gospels, was said to have been destroyed and mysteriously buried by an earthquake in 749, along with the lost home of Jesus' apostles, only to now be excavated, and we don't know what's still underneath there that's going to be discovered right at a time that's really exciting, that we're waiting and watching for the Messiah to appear. And it's really neat that he's allowing these things to be unearthed right before he comes. That had to do with those that he loved that followed him. For the past 5 years, Professor Mordecai Aviam, in collaboration with Professor R. Stephen Notley, both researchers from Nyack College, and Mordecai Aviam of Kinneret Academic College of the Galilee, have led teams of archaeologists, students, and Bible enthusiasts on yearly excavations at El Araj. In 2020, excavations were suspended due to the pandemic and flooding caused by near record-breaking rainfall in Galilee. Notley and Aviam returned to El Araj during the summer of 2021 with hopes of exposing the entire mosaic floor that was discovered in 2019 and finding inscriptions within the ruins of the Byzantine church that could help them date and properly identify the site as the home of Andrew and Simon Peter. The 2021 excavation season 5, which took place from October 1st through October 15th, opened new squares in an effort to reveal the size and more of the Roman structures that were underneath the surface of the Byzantine church. During the summer excavation just completed, researchers found proof that the Byzantine period edifice was a major church, an elaborately decorated house of worship built in the late 5th or early 6th century with gorgeous mosaic floors and inscriptions. Subject to further archaeological investigation, researchers hypothesize that the doorless structure with sealed ruins could presumably be the basement of a middle-aged sugar factory that was built there, or that the church was intentionally or ritually buried after its destruction out of respect. You know, since this was a church cover-up, which is usually done by the Islamic Caliphate, it seems to me that that would have been, that's exactly when it disappeared, is when they invaded. So they would want to cover up the truth and not let it be known. And they mentioned Luke 9:10 in that scripture is, and Jesus took them, his disciples, and withdrew apart to a town called Bethsaida. When the crowds learned it, they followed him, and he welcomed them and spoke to them of the kingdom of God and cured those who had need of healing. According to a report from Patterns of Evidence, they said that the mosaic inscription newly discovered in the Church of the Apostles references a donor, Constantine, the servant of Christ, not to be mistaken with the Roman emperor of the same name, and continues with a petition for intercession by Peter, chief and commander of the heavenly apostles. Wow. The words are circled by a medallion and form part of a larger mosaic on the church's floor. Well, that's an extraordinary find that they didn't mention in the other articles. The title, Chief and Commander of the Heavenly Apostles, was frequently used by Byzantine Christians to refer to the Apostle Simon Peter, and only to him, according to archaeologist Mordecai Aviam from Israel's Kinneret College. Dr. Aviam's been leading the excavation at El Araj on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee for years. This discovery is our strongest indicator that Simon Peter had a special association with the basilica, and it was likely dedicated to him, since Byzantine Christian tradition routinely identified Simon Peter's home in Bethsaida and not in Capernaum, as it is often thought today. It seems likely that the basilica commemorates his house, said the Diggs academic director, Professor Notley. In 1921, a theory by Father Guardans Orfali suggested Capernaum as Peter's childhood home instead of Bethsaida. There is the octagonal-shaped church at Capernaum, but it isn't actually a basilica, so it cannot be the Church of the Apostles, contend Notley and Aviam. The site in Capernaum may have been Simon Peter's mother-in-law's home, and Simon Peter may have moved there later in life, perhaps after he was married. But the coolest thing of all is he says in his conclusion that the dedicatory inscription with the entreaty for prayer by Simon Peter is very important for identifying the apostles' association with the Byzantine basilica. It confirms the testimony of the 8th century Bishop Willibald, who visited the church, that Christianity in the Byzantine period commemorated the house of St. Peter at Bethsaida and not at Capernaum, Notley says. In addition, the persistent remembrance of the location of Simon Peter's home, in light of the recent archaeological evidence for surrounding earlier Roman period settlement of at least 12 acres, adds weight to our suggestion that the site of El Araj, Bet Habek, should be considered the leading candidate for New Testament Bethsaida, continued Notley. Excavations at El Araj will begin again in October. Archaeologists are hoping to find an inscription to Andrew, Peter's brother, since he is also supposed to have lived in Bethsaida, and the church would presumably have been dedicated to them both. So that is really cool. This is an aerial view of the mosaic floor of the church. This is more of a close-up view, aerial view of the mosaic floor. And this is a fragment of marble chancel screen. This is also part of the mosaic floor in the church, at the Church of the Apostles. You can kind of see some of the detail there. Kind of a woven look. Just really neat. And this is part of a Crusader period lamp. Looks like it's only part way there, but pretty neat. And you can see the coins that they found, just as they were in situ, next to the Jordan River and Sea of Galilee. So this is it right here. So there's the Jordan River right there. So I'm going to read that exciting part just one more time for you. The Mosaic inscription, newly discovered in the Church of the Apostles, references a donor, Constantine, the servant of Christ, not the Roman emperor by the same name, and continues with a petition for intercession by Simon Peter, chief and commander of the heavenly apostles. The words are circled by a medallion and form part of a larger mosaic on the church's floor. The title, Chief and Commander of the Heavenly Apostles, was frequently used by Byzantine Christians to refer to the apostle Simon Peter and only to him. That is so chilling. It gets me so excited. And to know that they are still excavating and part of it has not been unearthed yet, and we have no idea what they're going to find. And I just know that God is up to something, and he's going to allow something. He allowed this whole site to be covered over and protected all this time, so that right now in our day we are witnesses to it being unearthed. And now, having had the wrong church built over the wrong site all this time, with them telling us that that was it, the house of Simon Peter, and it turns out it wasn't. And this new excavation is it. So I can hardly wait till they unearth the part that they actually lived in, that they can find underneath the Byzantine church, and the part that where they've seen on the scanners that there's other houses that are yet to be unearthed right in that vicinity. So this is thrilling and exciting, and I just had to come tell you because I just love archaeology. I have some of it in my book that, people were really cool to me and gave me pictures from Israel from some of the excavation sites, and the museum at Gynosor was one of them with the Jesus boat, and also Mary Magdalene's synagogue that was being unearthed without my knowledge at the time. It wasn't advertised. But I was writing about some things about Mary Magdalene the Lord was revealing at the time. And at the same time, they had not announced that they had just unearthed her synagogue. And so I was able to get pictures of her synagogue for my book from the excavation site, from the people there. So it was really thrilling and exciting. And if you want to read about some of these things, you can read about it in my very large book, which covers both of those topics. And it's The Almond Tree, Aaron's Rod, the Messiah King of Israel. And also it has botanical pictures from Dr. Avinoam Danon, of Emeritus Professor of the Hebrew University. He's now passed away. He died during Hanukkah, just right after I got the book published, but he gave me a lot of the botanical pictures for the book and really helped me out. We were going to swap the Shroud of Turin book that he found botanicals on the shroud, the burial shroud of Jesus, and we were going to swap books, and then he died. So that was a bit of a disappointment that I did not get to meet him in person, but we traded little seed samples. Well, actually, I sent some to him, and he was discovering all of these little designs in these teeny tiny seeds, one of which had a heart shape on the teeny seed. So I had a certain species, and he wanted to look at it through the microscope. So anyway, it was pretty cool. It was really neat that God orchestrated all that. So I'm really glad that by a miracle of God that he got my book in Harvard University Library through a Judaica endowment of all things. So Jewish people got it put in the library. And it's all about the testimony of Jesus, Yeshua, the Jewish Messiah. So I hope you'll want to read it and everything. But for now, I just want to leave you with that thrilling story, and not knowing that they had found that inscription on the floor referring to Simon Peter. So that's really, really cool. So shalom for now. I'll talk to you later.